So we're going to go into the secure by design aspect now, and having a good set of understanding or design principles baked into what you're doing, how you're deploying services going forward, and how important that is for your organization. So Microsoft have a framework. They have lots of frameworks, but this is probably a really important framework for this section anyway. I'm looking at how well architected services are. So making sure that you understand different components, the different aspects of a solution, making sure you cater for all of them as we go along will help you deliver ultimately a more secure design, leading to more deliverable governance within that environment as well. So as everything with Microsoft, it's built on pillars. So there's 5 pillars that we'll go into in the next slide, a bit more detail. But delivering against these 5 pillars will allow the organization to get a quicker realization of cloud benefits. So whether that's cost reduction, scalability, or security, through governance, being able to build robust, secure, and more highly available services. So I'm moving to the cloud. I want to utilize some of that cloud scale and hyperscale platform. How can I do that? Governance is at the center of that as well. Looking over cost controls. I want to move to cloud because it's cheaper. Okay, well, we've all heard that before, but how can I actually deliver that? How can I make sure that's a realization? And you're going to surprise, it's governance that's going to drive that through your organization as well, being able to make sure that we do enforce policies, we are able to control our spends and understand where the spends are. Agility, so we've already talked about agility, but making sure we have that agility and flexibility to not just go down the same old road because we have done in the past, making sure that our governance process can cater for exceptions or the change in the normal. So if security governance is a perfect example of that. My compliance department won't let me deploy this certain tool set because it hasn't gone through a check. Well, what governance framework is there to raise that exception or to add that into your security framework? How can you quickly change to include this piece of software into your security framework? And being able to demonstrate that, and surprise again, it's that governance piece as well. Looking at repeatability and simplification of the services, so stripping down some of their monolithic pre-cloud workloads into something that's more simply delivered and repeatable back to your customers as well. Looking at tooling to make that a reality, which is underpinned by governance. I think you can get the thread of the conversation here and how this is going to work. So the well-architected framework, like I said, it hits the 5 pillars there. So looking at cost optimization, being able to manage cost and the value that's derived and delivered from that cost as well. So it's not just about my VM cost me X. It's, well, what does that mean to me as an organization? That money I'm spending on that VM, is that valuable to my organization? Performance excellence, so making sure that the lights are on, the system is up and running in a production environment, it's able to serve customers' requests, the service that underpins the workload, making sure that it's there and it is available for your users, and providing that excellent service that we all strive for. Tying in with the performance efficiencies, so yes, we can chuck loads and loads of resources at machines and workloads to make sure they are performing very well, but it's that efficiency, it's making sure we're not overcommitting or undercommitting resources where they're needed. It's having elasticity within the environment as well, so making sure we can provide resources to where they're needed at the right time. Predicting change in workload loads ultimately. Reliability, so it's all well and good this all being up and available, but it needs to be there all the time. We need to be able to recover from failures. We need to strip down some of the components, so if one component fails, the whole thing won't fall over. So looking at how we can decouple the workloads and present them as potentially microservices or something like that, so that the service does continue to operate in the event of a disaster or catastrophic failure within the service. and security. It goes hand in hand with all of this, and the governance frameworks as well, making sure we're able to protect applications and the underlying data from the bad guys, from the threats. They could be internal threats, external threats, but there are threats and there are risks presented to holding data and the applications that surround that as well. So all of these pillars, as you can tell, will lean on governance, and the governance frameworks, the governance control that you expose are essential part to achieving an excellence within that function as well. So we're going to go over a few scenarios where we can demonstrate good governance frameworks to reinforce the well-architected frameworks ultimately there, and different components of it. So this scenario, hopefully you can see it's not too small, but sometimes we have issues showing designs out on a PowerPoint, but this scenario is really about providing an overview of deploying secure applications within an Azure app service. So we're using the ASE, the app service environment, to restrict access from the internet via gateway services, utilizing tools such as the web application firewall that we're utilizing there, but also continuous integration and continuous CI/CD, so continuous deployment services, and control through tools such as DevOps as well. So this is ultimately building on that web app architecture, applying additional security where required. Is providing a dedicated tenancy for the data rather than a shared app plan. It's the web app service is a single tenancy, but utilizing the DevOps tooling to make sure that we enforce the governance process as well. So if we walk through the data flow, I think that's the next one. So if you look at the diagram that we have there, we'll walk through the user journey from the customer there on the bottom left. So the user will make a HTTP or HTTPS, let's put my teeth back in, request that will hit the application gateway. That's where the customer requests via the internet are always delivered. The user request is then triaged through the internal load balancer. So you can see the ILB box there up the center, the middle of the diagram. This in turn routes the traffic to the web app itself. The user can then proceed to do what they need to do via the web app, and it will also create a data set that's stored in the SQL database as part of the process. So this is an expense application that we've dreamt up as part of the scenario. So the user can go on, create an expense report via the web app service, store that data within the SQL instance, and then we can facilitate the continuous deployment when the code is checked in to the DevOps instance. So a new service that's within the web app. Maybe I need a new field, or there's a new expense type, or the VAT rules have changed, or whatever it is. There's an update that's needed to the web app service itself. That's checked into the DevOps. The DevOps then via an agent deploys the change to the web app service, and that's all managed through the governance. And the build VM will deploy the DevOps agent. The DevOps agent will deploy the data and pull the latest updates to the new web app service, and build from code ultimately an updated secured environment with no drift between different versions, and making sure that we're using DevOps as the center tool to enforce that governance as we go along. So looking at some of the components that make this possible, like I said, the web app service, it's a single tenancy environment. It's fully isolated from everyone else. So when customer A logs in to try and do that, they get a web app service instantiated for them, so we don't have to worry about other customers or other services having access to that data. The load balancers, the gateways, so the layer 7 firewall that manages traffic is important to that routing of the traffic to that web app for that customer. So obviously the rule sets that sit there will define how the customer is routed to the right environment. Also utilising service endpoints. So we could have stuck that on the same VNet, using peering or some other network mechanism, but making sure we use a service endpoint will make sure that that's enabled on the virtual network of the app service. Then the data will only flow between the two devices there, so the SQL database and the app service as well. And obviously the DevOps provides that governance function, helping the team collaborate. There's many sprints of work, development work in the back end, coordinating all the different updates and testing schedules before they can check the code in for release to production, utilizing the CI/CD pipelines to make that a reality, and reinforcing that governance practice makes that a reality. So that's the first use case, utilizing DevOps to deliver a secure web app. Here we're going to break down into authentication and looking at user access and request to certain resources utilizing Azure AD. So the model here is looking at incorporating identity and access into what your overarching security strategy is. It's ultimately utilizing a zero trust model. That zero trust treats all hosts as if they're from the internet. That there are no predefined trust models here. We're treating everyone as the same. They're all baddies from the internet, and we have to consider them as potentially hostile. So we need to start developing trust ourselves rather than relying upon inherent trust. This is going to utilize and focus upon building that strong authentication, authorization and encryption aspects, while also providing compartmentalization. These are big words today. to access that operational agility that we talked about earlier. So in this use case, you can see they're numbered there. Hopefully you can see them from your screens. The number one, we're going to look at credential management and how this controls the authentication process. To step number two, which looks at the provisioning and entitlement of management that defines access to certain packages, and then again we'll assign users access to resources and pushes data elsewhere as well. Three, which is looking at the authorization engine and the process of gaining authorization and evaluating the access policies that are placed on that as well. So obviously the policy enforces a lot of the governance, but the engine will then evaluate the risks based on certain algorithms that it has, and then it will dictate based on the user or the entity that's requesting access behavior. So some of the behavioral analytics that sit behind the scenes, it will check device compliance, and you check for endpoint management as well to make sure that engine has all the data available to it to ultimately make a decision. If the user is authorized, so we've gathered all that data, we're happy with it. The engine is happy with what it's doing. In number four there, you're gained access as per the controls that dictate what you're allowed to do. So we're happy. The policy allows you to do what you need to do. You've demonstrated your credentials. The endpoint says you are who you are. We're happy with that as well. The endpoint is what the endpoint is. We can then be in a decision to develop trust and grant access to be delivered via certain controls that are in place to provide you with that access. If it fails, then there's some real-time remediation that users can do to unlock themselves. So maybe it's a bad password, or there's blocked access via the endpoint is in China, or it's appearing as it's in China, or something like that, or it's requesting a second level of authentication or access via MFA. So I'm on a funny network at a funny time. Okay, MFA is going to say, Sean, are you really Sean? Well, here's a text message. Can you enter the code in to make sure you are really Sean? And it will then maybe grant access based on the engine processing the rules as well. Once access is gained or not gained, regardless, there's data that is spun out of this. Being able to analyze and report on that data is very important. So you want to know who's logging in, who's requesting access, how policies are being enforced or not enforced, how controls are being proliferated throughout your environment. Being able to report on them. That we have a range of tools we'll talk about later. Azure has a range of tools that you're able that's able to allow you to look at this. But in this scenario, we've pushed that data into a SIAM tool, so something like Azure Sentinel, acting as that security information event management system, which will be able to triage and understand the risk of what's happening within your environment a lot better than potentially me just looking through loads of logs or a less mature service. And that will then feed, it's a continual process which will then feed that behavioral analytics engine, and that will update the authorization engine based on real-time threats that are being seen in the environment there. So some of the components we talked about, so the credential management, that allows for the establishment of that trust, being able to utilize some of the components such as self-service resets of passwords, looking at banned passwords potentially, passwordless authentication, so things like Windows Hello. How are the credentials held within Windows Hello when you don't have to log in? It's obviously it's via facial recognition and things like that. How are we storing this level of credentials as well? Policies we talked about. It's a if that then statement. So going through how do we enable authorization, or how do we then set up the authorization engine to be able to make and enforce decisions based on these policies as well. We've talked about the access controls. So once the engine has made a decision on whether or not it's going to grant access or it needs to do something else, the controls will enforce the policies that have been declared earlier on. And then understanding the risk and detecting the risk. Like I said, utilizing some of the tooling that resides within Azure, audit traceability functions, utilizing things like Azure Monitor, Log Analytics, and moving things up into Sentinel as well. So you can see it's lots and lots of governance is enforced here, obviously through the policies, being able to manage that policy, and then the realization of that through to controls. It's a really good scenario and use case that we deploy for lots of our customers. Last one, this is a quick one, you'd be glad to hear. So looking at how you can bring some of the tools we talked about into hybrid environments as well. So you can see there from the box in the middle, we have our Azure environment where we have Security Center and Sentinel deployed, all capturing data and reading data into a Log Analytics workspace. We have dashboards, we have workbooks that are demonstrating and showing what's going on in the environment. So we've got that all set up very nicely, and we're operating and working in that framework as normal. But we want to start bringing in other resources that reside outside of Azure. So you can see from the diagram there, we've got on-premise resources. Being a Microsoft slide, they want to put some Azure Stack stuff in there, but it could be VMware, it could be Hyper-V, but utilizing the Security Center agents that will be deployed will allow us to read a lot of that data back. And also with other cloud providers, such as AWS, Google, whoever it is, being able to deploy agents into third-party environments will allow you to gather what your security posture is from all environments, not just the ones that reside within Azure. Obviously, you want to understand what's going on everywhere, regardless of where the assets sit. So being able to utilize agents, being able to collect data via proxies, collection proxies into Log Analytics, being able to act on all of your data is very important, not just a subsection that may or may not reside within Azure.